This video is called the Oregon Trail, and we're going to be looking at how the United States tamed and settled the western frontier. The first idea you need to know about is an idea called manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was a belief that people had in the 1800s that the United States deserved and was destined to control the land all the way to the west, from Atlantic to Pacific. It was a common belief, and it was used as justification for the United States to eventually control all of this land. And during the Mexican-American War and Indian Wars and different things where the United States had to use violence, many people believed it was okay because of manifest destiny. Here's a very famous cartoon where you see people heading west in covered wagons, following them as an angel. This kind of shows the idea of manifest destiny because people believed it was God's will or the destiny of God that the Americans would eventually conquer and control all of the land between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Besides manifest destiny, however, there were many other reasons people would head west. The original people that went to the west were fur traders to make money. Furs were very valuable in Europe, and catching furs, you could sell them and make money. Other people called missionaries would go to the west to try and spread Christianity and spread religion to Native Americans. But eventually people would head west in bigger numbers for either adventure, got bored of their old life, wanted to do something new and exciting, and they'd head west for an adventure. But the biggest reason people would head west was for cheap land, almost free land at times, that they could settle and live on and grow and farm on. So here is the trail that people would use to head to the west. You would start in Missouri, which was the westernmost, Independence, Missouri, the westernmost settlement and then you'd kind of head out into the unknown from Independence, head through this unorganized territory where there was no states or no real settlement. It would start to get settled over time, and you'd end up out west in Oregon City, Oregon. That's where the ending point of the trail was. And from Oregon City, people would, move all over into free and open land. So, in order to go on this journey, you had to have a number of things. First of all, you needed a wagon. The wagons would hold about 2,500 pounds of cargo. In order to pull this wagon, you would need a set of oxen or horse. Oxen were more common because they were cheaper, they were a little tougher, they could eat the grass and live longer, they could carry more, but some people did use horse. You need about 150 pounds of food per person to put in your wagon, and if you had a family of 4, you need about 600 pounds of dried meats and various unperishable food items to eat. 25 pounds of soap was about average. That's quite a bit of soap. It kind of baffles me how you have 25 pounds of soap. Oh, whatever. Anyway, the average cost per person was about $150, a lot of money back then. And in order to buy the wagon, the oxen, all the food, all the supplies needed for the journey, it could take families months, if not years, of saving in order to accumulate enough resources to head west. So a lot of people pretty much banked their whole future on this journey. Once you decided to head west, usually people would go in groups. It was called a wagon train. It wasn't always looking like this picture here. You see all the wagons in a row heading out west. At first it was just those missionaries and the fur traders, and the trail didn't get very much use. But starting in about 1840 to about 1869, when the railroad connected the east and west and the trail wasn't used anymore, about 400,000 people travel on this trail, which is pretty incredible, that the number of people that headed west. In one particular wagon train called the Great Migration of 1843, there were 1,000 people all going at the same time, 1,000 different wagons. That's pretty nuts. Like I said, these large groups were called wagon trains because it looked like a train, even though each wagon was individual. And people would kind of go out as a community. You'd go out with a number of different wagons at the same time for safety, for protection, but also just for company. The Oregon Trail, this journey, it sounds kind of exciting, adventurous, you're headed out west, but it really was incredibly dangerous. And it's estimated that about 20,000 people died along the way. 20,000 people, that's crazy. The reasons for death, the most common was disease, cholera, diphtheria, and even scurvy from eating, like spoiled meats or things that are bad that could kill you. But there was other even more bizarre deaths. Indian attacks. Indians weren't too keen on people moving into their land, so they would sometimes attack the wagon trains. Things like hypothermia, dying of cold, drowning, fording rivers, people would drown. People would get shot by accident, people out hunting, guns going off by accident, and there would even be very tragic things. It was not that uncommon for children or women to get crushed by wagons. The wagons moved slowly but weren't easy to stop. Kids get stuck under the wheel and die, and women and children, especially girls, would oftentimes get their dresses as they were walking alongside the wagon stuck in the spokes of the wheel and get pulled underneath. So although disease was the most common, there were other reasons people died, and about 20,000 people died altogether. It wasn't all fun and games either when people finally got out west. They went out there for this free open land, for this adventure, but it was really, really hard work. You see this picture here kind of shows what someone would have to do when they got out west. You got this free land, or in some cases cheap land. It wasn't always free, depending on the law and the place you lived. But in all cases, you were required to clear this land and use it and farm it and do something with it. They didn't just give it to you for nothing. You had to put your work into it. Clearing trees, digging up stumps, plowing fields, extremely tiring, lonely work. You weren't really around anybody else. It wasn't for everybody. Although most people stayed out west, many people that went out for this adventure turned around and headed back east because it just wasn't for them. They couldn't cut it out west. Well, all in all, the Oregon Trail is really important. First of all, that idea of manifest destiny, the idea that America deserved and was destined to control all this land, did help influence people to go west. At first it was just fur traders and missionaries, but eventually it was adventure seekers and people looking for a new life for cheap land. It was an expensive trip. It would take people months, if not years, to save for it, and people would risk their lives to do it because tens of thousands of people died of various reasons on the trail. In the end, once people got there, they encountered a difficult life, but for some it was satisfying. And because of these early pioneers, the West was settled, the forests were cut down, towns and cities were built, and eventually states were added to the country, and America continued to